Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. I'll be joined again today by my co host, Bob Greaves, and unfortunately, our guest that we had planned for today, Sarah Moorhead, of Recovering from Religion, is not going to be able to join us. She ended up leaving a bit earlier than expected to go to the American Atheists Convention coming up next weekend. So she will be joining us now. We've rescheduled that for April 7th. But today I wanted to open the show with a personal anecdote, a story that is very, very significant to me at the moment. It happened just yesterday. Yesterday, my wife and I spent 6 hours in the hospital in observation, watching our son, Casey. You remember Casey from last week jumping up on my lap and saying hi to the camera. He's very, very friendly, very boisterous and outgoing. He's 2 years old, and we were at my aunt and uncle's house yesterday, and he walked away. He went into the other room. My wife said, "Well, where's Casey?" And my mom went to look for him, and she found him in the bathroom holding my uncle's pill case. And he said, "I ate the candy." We were able to identify what the pill was. We talked to my uncle. There was only one that was missing, which was amazing in its start. It was luckily for us Saturday, so the end of the 7-day week, and the morning dose had already been taken. So there were only 4 pills in the pill case when he got it, and he'd only had the opportunity to take one. He had taken a blood pressure medication. 25 milligrams was the dosage. At his size, that is twice the maximum recommended dose after several weeks of titration. We called poison control. They told us that was a toxic dose and that we needed to rush him to the emergency room. They said that they would call ahead to make sure that we could get in as quickly as possible. We were lucky. We were very lucky. We stayed there with him for the entirety of the observation period. 6 hours is the half-life of the medication. So if he wasn't showing any symptoms by then, or they had everything stabilized by then, they'd let us go. And like I said, we were lucky. They fed him some liquid charcoal to absorb the medication, or to bind it so it would not be absorbed in his body. And that was the most traumatic thing he went through yesterday, was just drinking that liquid charcoal. I had to hold him down as we squirted it into his mouth, and he tried to spit it out and fought. And of everything that could have possibly gone wrong yesterday, we were lucky. Why am I so relieved is what could have happened. What could have happened is we could have not asked where he was. We could have not had that moment where we wondered, and he could have walked back out of the bathroom, having taken all of the pills that were in the case, and we would have had no idea. We were about to leave. We were probably 10 to 15 minutes away from going home and putting Casey down for his nap. We could have put Casey down for his nap yesterday, and he could have never woken up. Sorry, this is a live show. We were lucky. As I've said before, and I've made a very significant point of doing on this show, I'm an atheist. And moments like this are different in the perspective of an atheist. I had to look at the moment with an objective reality. Um, I could have prayed. I could have appealed to a higher power. I could, and people did. My wife did. I'm sure my family was. My wife's family, I know, was. But the fact is, we were lucky. We were not blessed. Casey is not alive because of divine providence. This was not answers to prayers. It was not a sign from God. This was a combination of diligent and attentive parenting and dumb luck. But not everyone is so lucky. Two of my best friends last year were faced with a choice of ending an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy that occurred in my friend's fallopian tube, or imminent death of both mother and child. This was the first child they had been able to conceive. Even after they went through the procedure, there were complications and my friend nearly died. That's not the only story I have. There's other anecdotes. My best friend, he's as close to me as a brother, lost a child last year in pregnancy, or his wife did. One of the closest, or I'm sorry, one of the nicest and most conscientious couples I have ever met suffered through 5 miscarriages before they decided to give up, and they adopted. And these are the pregnancies that ended before the child was born. My mother lost a sister as an infant. She was 4 months old when she died, and that was admittedly about 60 years ago. Today, there are 21,000 children under the age of 5 years old that die. They will die today. They'll die. 21,000 children will die again tomorrow, on average. That's the numbers we're hitting, or at least those were the numbers in 2010. So for me to look at what happened yesterday and to say this was divine providence, this was a blessing, an unanswered prayer, is an insult. It is arrogant. It is harmful to all of those other parents who have lost their children, to the lives of the children that were lost. We were lucky. My friends were lucky that after an ectopic pregnancy, my friend was able to survive. The other couple was lucky that they were able to adopt after 5 miscarriages. They were in the economic situation to do it. But the miscarried infants weren't lucky. Those pregnancies ended, and they may have ended for biological reasons that meant they never could have survived past that, or we'll never know. In the end, though, it is arrogant, it is harmful, and it is destructive for us to look at this situation that happened to us yesterday and for me to say, thank God for answering our prayers and saving the life of my child, for intervening in this way. Because for 21,000 children yesterday, that didn't happen. Today I wanted to focus on that subject and more. The subjects, a lot of people talk about pregnancy. I'm not sorry, about religion as beneficial for the comfort that it can bring to people, and it is comforting. I have to say there's certain things that could have been comforting to me yesterday with that. They say that it brings people hope. It helps them get out of sadness. And that's something that we have talked about in the past on this show, but the reality is that we're going to need to face that if we're going to move on from religion in many ways. And I know that I'm talking to an audience here that is not necessarily looking to move on in that way, but I'm an atheist, and I'm speaking to other atheists as much as everybody else, that, and especially to people who might be speaking to an atheist, that what you're saying could be harmful. It could be damaging. Yesterday, people said to me that this was our prayers being answered, that this was a an intervention. This was a blessing from God that everything worked out so well for us. And they don't know. These were strangers saying this to me. We could have been parents who in the past had lost a child in this way. And just the implications of that kind of a statement are things that people don't think about. And that's what I wanted to talk about today on the show. So thank you for staying with me through my story and bearing with me um, in the live circumstances here. But Bob, how are you doing today?
Greetings. I'm doing fine. I'm also very glad that Casey is doing well, and
Thank you.
parents. it's uh, we all whenever we go through anything similar to that, it's a very frightening sort of thing. So I'm glad Casey's doing fine.
We are too. And honestly, Casey wouldn't even know the difference if it hadn't been for us telling him how dangerous things were yesterday and seeing the concern in us. But again, we were lucky.
Did you tell him? I mean, I.
Oh, absolutely. If we ask him now,
Uh,
what are pills? His answer is dangerous. He, um, we're working on. We also last weekend I was at my brother's house, and my brother has a 11-year-old stepson, and we were up in his room. He was showing me his violin, and Casey walked out with a water bottle with pink water in it, and was drinking it. And we had no idea where that had come from or what was in it. So I took a sip as well to figure it out, and it luckily was just some strawberry flavored water. But these things. That's a
oh
toddler.
yeah. We live in a relatively when we compare what things are like today to what they were like, you know, uh, 50 years ago or whatever. We live in a day where we're very isolated from many of those sorts of incidents in terms of knowing about them when they do happen, and also having kept them from happening in some ways. But today we don't hear that often as they did, say, 100 years ago, of all the miscarriages and child deaths and it seems to me like even just what you're talking about in terms of relating it to what you how you make sense of it all. It was more of a challenge uh, to make up stuff, say a century ago.
I think that might actually be one of the religion or one of the reasons that religion is fading in our culture today is the death of a child is one of the most difficult things to bear for anybody. It's senseless, it's meaningless, it's a horrible experience, and it's something that having the hope that that child lives on into another life is, I'm sure, extremely comforting, and it really has to bring a lot to the table. But I've heard people say things like, "Well, well, God took your child because He needed him in heaven." I'm sorry, I needed him here too. that
But
I
it's
just
yeah. I got to be honest with you that first of all, I'm like unlike you. I'm not an atheist. I'm definitely a person who's a theist. You got to put a word. You got to put a space there.
tricky
Um,
language there.
but that is a thinking that religious people like to do. That I got to be honest with you. It doesn't make sense to me. It strikes me as a way of being able to put aside the need to cope and deal with such risks. And they're very real. And it also gives, I think, a false comfort, this feeling that, well, since it wasn't in God's plan, that's why it didn't happen to me. And if it did happen to me, it's all because it's God's plan. Um, that I I wouldn't want to mock the person going through the duress of such a situation, but it strikes me as being, you know, lazy, assumptive, and but as you had said, it's very cruel to people who have suffered the loss. It doesn't work out as well as it did for you, for everybody. As you said, there's a what 25,000 kids die a year. Or what was
21,000. It's
it?
down from 33,000 from 1990, I think. I did some research coming into the show here.
Yeah.
In that was
So
numbers
how
from
many?
2010, but in 2009, the numbers for, again, child mortality is considered children under the age of 5, so 4 years old and younger, um, or before their fifth birthday, that have not made it, and globally, that number is um, right about 5%. 5%. That is 1 in
That's a
20.
lot. Yeah, that's a lot.
Eh,
Um, and and those people don't find it at all comforting. They feel abused,
The
and
other things here,
that's
that 1 in 5 is not the case here in America. That's not anywhere near the numbers that we see. So we have to consider that we're one of the more populous countries on the planet. So to have that kind of an average, there's got to be some pretty significant other child death rates in other countries to balance that out. In Chad, in 2009, the child death rate was 21%. That is 1 in 5 children who died in Chad in 2009 did not make it. Or, or I guess
and I
1 in
think
5 of the
you
children
can
born
attribute
after
that very
2005.
much to uh, the lack of wisdom, the lack of resources, the lack of political stability, and various other things that cause that horrific loss. But
Absolutely. I think that we don't recognize how lucky we are. Our situation, I was born in right here in Appleton, Wisconsin, at the hospital we brought my son to yesterday. And it was
mm,
it was easy. My mom had a planned cesarean section for me for because she had some complications with my older brother's birth. Um, there were not any major incidents. Apparently, my dad told me yesterday. I didn't even know this. I had a very similar incident when I was about Casey's age. My dad had found me with my grandfather's pills strewn about, and there was missing warfarin or Coumadin, which is a powerful blood thinner that I had taken.
right? Yeah, you can hemorrhage.
Yeah, so these are all, I guess, facts of life that we look at. But I was lucky in that situation too, and I was lucky to be born in America, in Wisconsin, in the Midwest here. My parents were not wealthy, but they had jobs. My mom, was she struggled. She worked 3 jobs when I was a kid, and my brother and I did not see her a whole lot. We saw our grandparents a lot, and other people willing to watch us for free, and we struggled to make things work. But we grew up near the poverty line here in America. But to say poverty in America is to neglect the fact that in the rest of the world, even some of the poorest people here are living at the well above middle class standards.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
our poor have food. They have maybe not nutritious food, but we provide for them. There are thousands of children that die every day from malnutrition. Now, what does it
Yeah.
say as part of a divine plan that could be? Or what part of a divine plan could that be?
I think it's a highly irresponsible story to talk about this somehow having anything to do with God's divine plan. I think it shows a great deal of, um, uh, our human mismanagement. We we've broken, we've divided the earth up into political powers and into jurisdictions. And in some ways, we've done that because it's necessary. It's necessary to somehow bring some sort of order and structure to our cultures, to our societies. But in doing so, in our power hunger, in our struggles, in our insecurities, we have sometimes made these structures abusive. We've also made them so that they're not really holding our best interests in mind, but rather the best interests of people who possess the power. And the fact that we could be in a day of the technology we have today, and that we are not changing the way that's working, strikes me as being an indictment to what we think is our own empathy, our own love, and to try to even bring God in on the story is to, I think, circumvent our own responsibility. Personally, that's the way I'd see it.
We have a viewer comment. First of all, the viewer says, "I'm so glad your son is okay, Greg," and thank you for that. I am as well. Um, the question though is, as a theist, I'm curious to ask you, what contentment, what hope, what security do you find in believing that your life is subject to the uncaring and unloving brutality of the process of evolution, and that your life does not escape the mindless effects of the Big Bang? Now, I want to qualify that this viewer it does not mean this in a mean-spirited way. I said so directly. I really don't mean this in a mean-spirited way. Love to you and to your family. I think that that is a very legitimate question, and it's something that can, given the circumstances, be insulting to some people, but I think that that's an important thing to be addressed. And the reality is, as an atheist, I don't get contentment or security from the understanding that my life is subject to the uncaring and unloving brutality of the process of evolution, and that my life does not escape the mindless effects of the Big Bang. I mean, that's not comforting thoughts. Matter of fact, that's something that a lot of atheists struggle with when they lose their faith. That's something that I was hoping to discuss with Sarah on the show today. There's a lot of nihilism in atheism. A lot of people really have trouble coping with the loss of an idea of a bigger plan or a grand scheme of things, an ultimate meaning. But I think that to limit the scope like that is not to understand the full experience of all life. I mean, what comfort do you personally, as a theist, get from knowing that I'm trying to use your own words here, that you are, or from believing that you are not subject to an uncaring and unloving brutality of the process of evolution, or that your life does escape the mindless effects of the Big Bang? I mean, those are pretty deep existential questions, and those don't really dig at most people most of the time. That's not the kind of things that your day-to-day life are really strongly affected by. But what they are affected by is your interactions with other people, your love that you experience on a daily basis. It can be a daunting reality that I am faced with the fact that there is no ultimate meaning in life, but that doesn't mean that there's no meaning in my life at all. I find meaning in my life. It means incredible amounts to me every moment that I get to spend with my son, because this is the only life I'm ever going to have to do that. I don't have an eternity to look forward to. It really, in my eyes, brings more value to it. Um, I know that I'm subject to the process of evolution, and that means that my body is imperfect. My family heritage comes with a lot of heart disease, comes with cancer, comes with a lot of very significant factors that mean it's unlikely for me to live past the age of 80. And that means, well, tomorrow's my 28th birthday.
No
I
kidding.
therefore, uh, thank you. I have
Happy birthday.
I have 52 years left, about maximum, judging by my family history here, to make the best of, and to do something, to leave a positive change in the world, and to leave the world a better place than I got it, to improve the lives of those around me, and to give guidance and love to my son so he can carry on the legacy, and to my future children, my nieces, my nephews, the other my godchildren, the people in my life. So it doesn't give me comfort to know that I'm subject to the uncaring and unloving process of evolution, but that's not the only place that I could potentially find comfort, I guess, is the
You know,
direct
I
answer.
would even want to say something about that from the standpoint of a person who is a believer. Um, and that is that, uh, there's a verse that is often misused. In fact, we've heard it misused a bit by these strange arguments we've been dealing with. But, the concept in the Bible where it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. There's two of those phrases. Um, I'm a person who would contend that the phrase "the fear of the Lord" was a phrase that was used by that culture. That although it includes pointing toward God, it did that merely out of cultural respect. Theirs was a culture that tried to build everything they did in a manner that was focused on God, but that I don't think it meant that they always did it in a way that was just kind of make pretend or superstitious or whatever. Sometimes they just phrased things that way, just as a respectful way. And I understand that phrase, the fear of the Lord, to mean a respect for the way nature works. And as a result, I would say that even this culture that gives us the cult of Yahweh recognized you face the risks of a real world. And if you're not going to understand that, that's going to affect your ability to really know what you need to know. That's going to affect your ability to grow in real wisdom. And this belief that many Christians might have that they are somehow exempt from these risks, or that these risks are actually being managed by a God with a plan. This actually removes from them the need to make sure they know what they're doing. I mean, for example, one of the reasons why Casey is fine is because you know enough to say, what are you doing? What's going on? And you know enough to inspect further when he talks about the candy. And, your knowledge, if you had been the kind of a person who wanted to believe that nothing terrible would ever happen to my son until it was God's plan, would you be as careful about these sorts of things? You know what I'm saying? And I think that this false sense of security that is created by this notion that somehow God is manipulating events behind the scenes creates a group of people who are far more foolish and less knowledgeable, and in a very real way. And I got to tell you, this doesn't change the fact that I'm a believer. But then again, I'm a believer who doesn't use belief as an excuse to somehow think that I am somehow an exception to the risks of life. But when I was, for years, I worked in various different ways where I ended up in the book. I mentioned this before, in the books of different companies. And I got to tell you, the books of the companies run by Christians indicated a great number of very bad decisions that they would make based upon the fact that they were counting on God to allow them to be an exception to the due diligence necessary to making a proper business decision. And that and they would make their decisions that way. They would often come up losing, but they would never admit to themselves, maybe they need to really be real businessmen who make real decisions based upon real probabilities and a real consideration of the options and of the risks and of the advisability of certain options and decisions. And they won't do it. And I think it makes them foolish. I think it makes them less wise as businessmen, and I think there's an example of where I've seen this false notion that believers can have. And I say this as a believer, that when they do that, and of course, once you've invested yourself in that and you've suffered certain consequences and losses as a result of it, now you have egg on your face if you're going to admit, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. So they, instead of learning from their mistake, they just dig in deeper. That's a shame.
Well, you heard it here. Excuse me. You heard it here first. That's the word I was looking at or looking for. That was a stronger condemnation against religious thinking from a theist than an atheist here on this show today. Um, and I wanted to make this distinction. I was having a conversation on Facebook earlier this week talking about religious faith and the different kinds of faith that people have. And I've made this distinction on the show before. But religious faith, in my understanding of it, is a way of reasoning, a kind of thinking. And atheists are not exempt from it. Just because it's not
No.
coming from a dogmatic religious tradition does not mean that something is not a religious form of faith. I have a very atheistic friend who is very prone to conspiracy theories and to a serious gambling problem because he has a religious way of thinking that things are going to work out okay for him in the gambling and things are going to work out great for him. And in the way of thinking that the government is out to get him or out to get all of us. So it's a way of reasoning, and this is what I advocate so strongly against. Now, I think that it should be obvious by now. I'm okay with theists and Christians and Muslims and anybody else who tries to avoid that as much as possible, in the way that you, Bob, do, and Dr. Jones, and so many other people, everybody but probably William. No, that was for if he actually decides to watch this show. Um, he could benefit from it.
Low blow, low blow, low blow.
Yeah. Uh, Sorry, you guys don't get to watch our production meetings on Monday mornings. They're a lot of fun. um, but I think that it's a significant reality to understand that kind of reasoning is a problem. However, I'm not going to be quite as condemning about the way of reasoning in this situation as you are, because I think that coping is a touchy subject, and there's all kinds of things that work regardless of whether they're right or wrong. And if thinking that your baby is alive in or has another life in heaven, or that that God needed your baby to not be here because He needed it in heaven, okay, I don't want to take that away from you. If that's what helps you deal with this situation, like I said, the death of an infant is tragic. It
Awful.
is an
Yeah.
extremely difficult thing to handle, and I don't want to take it away from you. But my appeal
the
to you is
also
not.
if we're going to be honest, and sometimes being brutally honest isn't always the kind way to be. There's a time for that brutal honesty and a time not for it. But um, we certainly all face the risks of life in a way that it's not easy. And this isn't to say that the sense we can make of it is always that obvious either. So but um,
This
the
reminds me of
other
a
thing that
Daniel
I think is
Dennett
important though
quote.
is to realize that all of our stories, all of the stories we have, are the stories of survivors.
That's true. That's well, I mean, unless you read some books out there, those are stories of people who didn't survive but came back. And
Yeah.
I don't think that those are the stories that, or they are what the people who wrote them think they are. But there's the quote that this brings to mind here is it's from Daniel Dennett, an atheist philosopher, one of the four horsemen of new atheism. It's there is no way to, or no polite way to suggest to someone that they have devoted their entire life to a folly. Um, and it's true that there are certain situations. I mean, if I'm talking to a priest, um, what I'm saying is probably pretty insulting. If I'm talking to somebody who did lose their child and has been coping with it in this way, that's tough, and I don't want to hurt people with the words that I say, but I also don't want people to hurt, I inadvertently hurt people with the words that they say. So my appeal to you is cope with things however works for you, and do that with whatever honesty you can muster. But the appeal is to not push your coping mechanisms onto other people in these situations, because had something terrible happened to me yesterday, it would have been incredibly, incredibly hurtful for
Hmm.
somebody to make some of those comments to me. So that's my appeal with the show today, is that yes, religious faith can bring upon um, comfort. It can bring happiness. It can bring joy. It can help people cope, but let that come from themselves. Don't try to tell them that it should bring those things to them, because that's, I think, one of the most harmful things that we can do without being aware that we're doing it, and with all of the best intentions. I don't know where to go from there.
Well, are we going to have Sarah with us next week? Is that it?
um,
Or 2 weeks from now?
April 7th, so it looks like 2 weeks. Next weekend is the
2 weeks.
American Atheists Convention, so she will be in Austin for that. She did say she could do the show today. I mean, she was very gracious and said, I don't want to reschedule. I'm really excited to be on the show, but I'm traveling, and they're driving. So she said, I don't know what my internet connection is going to be like, and we don't even know what a phone connection is. So we said, don't worry about it. Come back, when the convention is
Yeah.
over. Um, she's also traveling with a brand new infant. So that's, I understand that as well.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it'd be good to talk to her when she's finally available. Yeah. In fact, I'd actually spoken to her myself about the possibility of having her on, and so you kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to have her on my show at some point. Probably will still, but yeah, and she's actually caught. I think originally she caught some of our videos, and from the New Covenant group. And I think she caught the one actually with Cy on it.
Yeah, I think that is where she saw it, because I know that she knows Dave Silverman personally, so she had watched the show. I believe it was that day she had been on another podcast with Dave. So
Uh-huh.
that he had a busy day that day. So that's probably the connection there. But that's an appeal that I wanted to make to the viewers as well. Sarah watched our show on YouTube. We do post all of these shows on YouTube after they're on, and we have a message that we're trying to spread. The New Covenant group, I think, is moving people forward. It's a very significant thing that we're doing here, and I believe in it very fully. It's a calling for me to be a part of this, and I know it's odd to hear that kind of terminology coming from an atheist, but it's something that I am compelled to continue doing, and it means a lot to me. And I hope that what we're doing is something that you viewers also like, and want to see more of. And we would love if you share our videos from YouTube. If you make a post on Facebook or Reddit or whatever social media or is your favorite, to let people know that our show's about to be on, or our shows are about to be on. Tell people about the guests that we have, or what you thought of it. We, we have a message, and we need your help to spread it. So thank you for doing that. And also, please, we have about 10 minutes left in the show, and it's relatively unplanned at this point. So if you have any questions, or any way that you'd like to interact with us, we have a number you can text into. You can. I don't know if the call in is set up right now, but please be a part of the show. Be a part of the process. Be a part of the movement. and help the New Covenant group do what it can to reduce the harm of religion and bad faith in the world today. I also want to talk about the show that we have coming up later today. Bob, you're going to be joining me with Dr. Jones and a few other people to talk about bad arguments, right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Don't know exactly how that's going to go, and I was just only recently asked to be a part of that, so I'm not really entirely sure how that'll work. But yeah, we're going to go do that. Yeah,
So this is a marathon day for you. You're going to be going straight from 6 o'clock until 10 o'clock.
yeah, which means I won't be at the production meeting tomorrow too, because I just can't do all of that and then end up with I I got to teach tomorrow, and so I got to, and in fact, starting a new unit tomorrow, so I've got to be there to, I got to really work at preparing for that, and I've got tests to return, so I got a lot of things to get done tomorrow morning.
Now, if I was a preacher, I might guilt you about where your priorities are right now, Bob. Um,
Yeah. Oh, you can give me where my priorities are, and I won't listen anyway.
Now, I'm excited for that show. Later today, we're going to be addressing the argument that Psy makes, but also some of the other general fallacies and ways of reasoning that, as I mentioned, everybody does. It's not that we atheists are distinct from all these flaws in our reasoning. We're not immune from them, but I think that one thing that this show, particularly with the name Inspiring Honesty, needs to be dedicated to is to helping to reveal those problems and call them what they are. That a flaw in reasoning is a flaw. It's something that we should try to avoid. And the show that we're doing tonight is exciting to me because we've not yet really dedicated a full segment to bad reasoning in its core and talked about what we can do to avoid that and ways that we can call ourselves out on those things. I'm looking forward to it a lot.
Yeah, as I'll tell you, I think that uh, lazy reasoning is. I, I would want to say this. I don't think that good reasoning always leads us to definitive answers. But I think that good reasoning leads us to far more responsible thinking and thereby wiser living, more useful thinking, but lazy thinking often results in things that are just absolutely there's things that we can know to be very foolish and false, and other things which we can really just count on as having good odds. So good thinking doesn't always result in the results we'd like to give to it, but bad thinking just results in bad results.
Well, there's also a significant difference between lazy reasoning being almost a non-reasoning and then bad reasoning, because bad reasoning, almost by definition, it's still reasoning. You're still trying to do it, and you're failing for one reason or another, and that I think is more dangerous. Is lazy reasoning is just coming at something and not caring enough to really think about it. And frankly, there's a lot of things that we all do that in every day. I mean, do you really consider the pros and cons of everything that you eat? I mean, a nutritionist might, but I don't. I eat what I feel like eating because it tastes good, or because it's at hand, or for any other reason. And that's why I'm a touch chubby. But I just don't care enough, and it's lazy. It's lazy reasoning on my end. It could have
Well,
long
you're
term
going to
health
die by the
effects.
time you're 80 anyway.
Right, exactly. Heart disease and things run in the families. So even for the skinny fit people, they still have clogged arteries, and I don't need to worry about that. It's
Now,
going to
now,
happen
now you're
either
getting
way.
into some bad thinking.
Right, that's bad reasoning. See the difference? That's
There you go. Excellent illustration.
uh, it's my dad used to do that. My dad is a former smoker, and I'm actually proud to say my brother is a former smoker. I've been trying to convince him to quit for years, and he has not had. Actually, I think he's had 2 cigarettes since the first of this year, and I was so proud to hear that. But my
Mm.
dad, when I was, I think, 3 or 4 years old, I learned that cigarettes were bad for you, and I looked at him and I said, "Daddy, you're gonna die." And he said, "No, I'm gonna get cancer, but by the time that comes around, they'll have a cure." Bad reasoning. And he told that to his son too, which was also bad parenting, I think. But there is what it is. Uh, well, we don't have much time left for the show. We've got just about 2 minutes, so I'm going to start with a sign off here. And Bob, I guess I wanted to give you the floor to ask what's coming up on your show. What can the viewers expect on
Well,
the Unconventional Pastor today?
the last two shows I've been talking about some of the words that people ask me to talk about, and I had a few more to talk about. Plus, I was also today going to talk about flowers. Well, a specific flower, the tulip.
All
Um,
right.
the Calvinist view is one that has been sometimes reduced to 5 points, called the tulip. TULIP, standing for significant words in the 5 points that tend to distinguish Calvinism from other forms of theology. So I was going to talk about the tulip.
Well, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
I
there's also
can't say that I'll be
another
able to watch it live. It's
theology
my dinner
contrary
time
to
between shows.
Calvinism called Arminianism, and there's one flower associated with them. It's the daisy. Because they believe you can lose your salvation, as it were. And so that's why they use the daisy, because he loves me not. But anyway, all these children of the flower children of theology. Talk about that.
Well, it sounds like a fantastic show. I'm looking forward to watching it in the archives. Like I said, I won't be able to watch it live. It's my dinner time between shows here. But that is it for Inspiring Honesty this week. Join us again next week when I have no idea yet what we're going to discuss, but viewer suggestions are always welcome, and comments, of course, are encouraged during the show. Uh, Tune in about 10 minutes for The Unconventional Pastor, and then again at 8 o'clock for The Place, where Bob and I will be together once again with a few other people and Dr. Jones, and I think Rhonda is going to be there too today. And we will have the whole crew together. So, well, I mean, all the important people anyway. You have a great day, and join us again for Inspiring Honesty next Sunday at 6 o'clock.